Friends, good evening and a very warm welcome to this very special session, which is following a very intense conference of last 2 days. We called it Delhi 5, but the process and the idea was to bring in the cooperation and the potential, the expectation, the norms among the developing countries. And for those of you who are not aware, we call that South-South cooperation. And the partnership among developing countries and the partnership with developed countries, which is called triangular cooperation, also we explored. But then we are realizing that as the frontiers of international relations, particularly trade and economic linkages, and many other strategic and other areas, as they are moving fast, and in last 5 years, government has taken so many major changes in the approach, outcome, and assessment of the policy measures. There is need for everybody to catch up and understand the dynamics of this change. How we theorized it, how we collate experiences and our engagements with the process, and see how university and think tanks can work together. Since there is a greater urge in the system. Prime Minister himself has been indicating the requirement of out-of-box thinking, and that out-of-box thinking is largely coming, as you can imagine, from outside the system. And more policy inputs are being desired from people who are not part of the government and those who are out of the government. And this has contributed in magnificent changes that have happened all this last 5 years and probably would continue in next few years. The debates on policy making, both in the realm of economic and trade linkages, in the strategic sphere, and of course in the IR per se, they are going through several changes. So we thought that after we finish the Delhi 5, which was the 5th conference in the Delhi process, what we would do is to reach out to university professors and bring them in along with a couple of think tanks and people who are actively engaged in the process in this discussion meeting after the conference. So quite a few of you, and particularly those of you who travel from other cities, have very patiently heard this 1.5 day discussion. And we started pretty early today at 8:30. So there was a time when we were thinking in Delhi that no seminar can begin before 10 o'clock. So we are shattering and setting new benchmarks ourselves, and things have moved. There was time in the government when people used to think that Saturday, Sundays are for holidays. That 5 years ago was shattered completely. There are no Saturdays and no Sundays for anybody, those who are working close to policymakers. So we are experiencing this. I do not know, I don't recall when RIS was last closed, except for late night hours. And there are colleagues of mine who work till 10 o'clock. So what I'm trying to say is that these standard approaches are getting completely shattered. We are in times when things are evolving very fast. And what I'm benefited here with is not just the dialogue that is confined to Indian universities and Indian think tanks. I have requested some of my participants who came to the Delhi 5 conference to also join here. And here we have a member secretary of the Indian Council for Social Science Research, ICSSR, Professor Malhotra, who is trying to internationalize the approach and the content and the funding program of ICSSR. So they have launched many initiatives where they are trying to connect ICSSR institutions, ICSSR funding patterns with this new international vision that Prime Minister is trying to come up with. I'm also very thankful to Professor Bhushan Patwardhan, with whom we have been interacting for ages now, but in a very different capacity. He is one of the few in this country who has tried to apply his scientific temper and his expertise in biological sciences to India's traditional medicine sector. And he is of the view that those who are trying to contribute to the idea of partnership with traditional medicine would have to apply new science and new technology to these initiatives. And that he has done uniquely well, and I'm so glad that he's now part of the university grant system, contributing to the idea of this new architecture. So friends, as we are meeting here with the think tank University Connect, there is another initiative which RIS has launched, and quite a few of our delegates are in that room, which is about Young Scholars Forum. Not that those who are here are not young, but that's another forum where we have scholars almost below 30 and are from 27 different countries, and we have invited equal number of young scholars from other parts of the country, and they are deliberating on how they view South-South cooperation. So my colleague, Professor Milindo Chakravarti, who has tried to put this concept together, is in another room. He is not here, but I'm thankful to him for getting all of us together here, and to my other RIS colleagues, Chairman RIS, Dr. Mohan Kumar, who is also engaged in academics, but he brings in his practical experience of 40-odd years as a diplomat. Yesterday we had his book received by the Trade Minister on WTO, and is one who has seen the transition from GATT to WTO. So he brings in the unique insights on research, but also on teaching. So there could not have been a better person to chair this session today. We also have now, as I said, some of these scholars and think tank people from outside. So once we finish this, we would be opening up the platform for discussions. But first I request Dr. Mohan Kumar for his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sachin, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be here today. I'd like to recognize the presence of Mr. V.K. Malhotra, Professor V.K. Malhotra, Member Secretary, Indian Council of Social Science Research, and Dr. Bhushan Patwardhan, Vice Chairman of the University Grants Commission. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for coming. My remarks are just going to be limited to the following. I personally think, and I have an axe to grind in saying this, that I think this is an excellent initiative, not just because we don't have enough universities in the country, but existing universities at least should be connected. And we should really try to pool our resources and see where this issue of South-South cooperation is going. For a start, and I'm sure this is what Sachin and other colleagues had in mind, can we at least have a website completely dedicated for this, which can at least give a casual onlooker a complete list of articles on the subject? This is something that I would like as a student of South-South cooperation. I mean, at the risk of being immodest, I know a lot about other things, but not enough about South-South cooperation. So if at a hit of your laptop, if you can have the list of really outstanding articles, thematic-wise, theme-wise, that would already be a wonderful thing to bring scholars all together. The second thing really which I wanted to say was that, I mean, I made this point earlier on, but among young students, and I know this is a different forum, as my colleague was saying, that the young scholars are meeting in another room, but I think it's very important that youngsters also realize the importance of South-South cooperation. I mean, I keep harping on this because even in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, at the risk of being frank, I will say that the youngsters who are now joining the Foreign Service, they do not automatically carry the same line of thinking as we did. I'm 62, so I certainly belong to a different generation. So you will find that there is not a cerebral anti-right kind of thing which we had. You know, in my generation, it used to be said that if you are young and if you're not a leftist and if you're not read Ayn Rand, what kind of an idiot are you? And if you are at 50 years, if you're continuing to do that, what kind of an idiot are you? So you have to kind of, do all these things. But you ask a youngster now, they would not even know what is Ayn Rand. Because they come from a completely different background. They're already sold on Washington consensus. That's my problem. trying to tell them that the state has returned and that there is something different. All this is important for South-South cooperation, because I think there is a tendency to think, and I think somebody made that point during the conference, excellent conference where, different people have made such different points. I hope we can really put them all together. One scholar made this point that there is a knee-jerk reaction to accept Western methods and try to see how it fits into your country. And that too, I think, is something that university scholars should be aware of. So I think the most important thing for me anyway is that even when you teach, and I now teach, and I'm proud to say that, you need to know the target audience. And the target audience is not at all what I was when I was 25 years old. That's what I'm trying to say. I think many of you have been in this profession much longer than me. So far be it for me to preach anything to all of you. But I think this is, I think it's a challenge. I'm not saying it's disquieting, because it's fine. To tell a youngster today that he has to kind of not like this pro-right thing or pro-West thing is difficult, because he has not seen scarcity the way we saw, my generation saw. He has not seen the fact that you have to wait 6 months to get a gas cylinder. All that is a thing of the past in India. So you're looking at a young generation which is completely different. And to me, that could be really the mojo of this initiative, that, this plus the young scholars thing, if we can combine both, then I think it will do a lot of good in terms of what scholars can contribute to South-South cooperation. But I don't think I'm qualified to say anything more, Sachin. I'm particularly happy to leave the floor to the two scholars who are here today. But thank you all for coming.
Friends, given the fact that we have limited time today, what we thought was that we would have the group divided into 6 different clusters, and each cluster would discuss on their table and then would come back to us telling us what they have discussed. What is crossing my mind right now is that a couple of you have already told me that you have your flights and you want to run out quickly. So what I'm now thinking is that I would first request Professor V.K. Malhotra and then Dr. Bhushan Patwardhan for their remarks, and then we can open up and we can have the cluster heads to make some observation, and then you can discuss in your table and then come back to us later. So first I would request Professor Malhotra for his remarks.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Sachin. I'm really thankful to RIS, in fact, its chairman also, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, and my very dear friend, Professor Bhushan Patwardhan, who happens to be here, and the knowledge leaders, in fact, in the country and the worldwide, in fact. It's a really good opportunity to be here this afternoon and be part of this process that I and Sachin have been repeatedly talking about, in fact. He rightly reminded me, I was very happy to see that there is another new initiative in this light, in fact, Forum for Indian Development Cooperation. So RIS under the Ministry of MEA and FIDC, they are collaborating for this event, in fact. And I'm told that this program has already seen 1.5 days of successful deliberations on all these issues. So far as Think Tech and University Connect is concerned, in fact, I do feel that this is where the country has been lacking, and most of us have become accustomed of doing some work in silos only. And hardly there existed any kind of synergy creation, in fact. And this is only in the recent past that we have started to understand that we need to work together, because there has been a growing understanding both at national and international levels that perhaps Indian scholarship could not have the kind of impact that it deserved to have. And that's largely because the reason that most of us have been working in isolation with the things. And another interesting part is that since international researchers and even researchers at the domestic level, they have proven the point that collaboration and collaborative researches, they have far more impact, not only at the national level, but also at the international level. And another interesting aspect, whenever I have been talking to our collaborators in England, largely led by ESRC UK, and now what was known as RC UK is now known as Research and Innovation UK. So whenever we talk to them, we talk in terms of the impact. And impact could be seen in various ways. There used to be only one typical way of defining the impact, and that was publication. And now we see impact in terms of the policy input, policy evaluation, and maybe to some extent, if there could be a new direction to the policy makers of the country, then that also. The scholarship in this country did not get the right space, in fact, in terms of its contribution towards policy formulation, nor anybody ever minded to have the scholarship, in fact, whenever they meant to formulate the policies. So there was a division between the policy makers and the scholarships of the country. I think this division now, there is a growing realization, both in terms of, as I said, impact for the scholars, and also in terms of the right kind of inputs for the policy makers. So policy makers do understand that we need to have right inputs, and today morning itself, when I was thinking about this issue, I did think that how many policy documents do we come across which are very well supported by the research inputs? Hardly, or very rarely there, in fact. So I think when policy drafts are written, it would be always pertinent to have the research-based evidence behind those drafts. And then only policy statement should be appearing before us. I would just very briefly like to share, since Sachin already has said that there is hardly any time, even on weekends now. So that's the position most of us are pressed into. And Professor Bhushan Patwardhan is no exception to that, in fact. Right. So while coming here, I did ask my office also that today I'll be at least there in the office throughout the day. So make some arrangement, somebody happens to be there. So it is always like that. I would just prefer to say that Professor Amartya Sen, in his Argumentative India, did talk that Indian continue to argument till the very end, in fact. But I think the scholars of this country have not tended to argue to the desired extent, in fact. And this is where it needs to be taken. The more collectively it is taken, and more in a collaborative manner it is taken to the policy level, I think we would have reasons to say that the impact of the scholarship in this country is far greater than it has imagined itself. And our experience, since Sachin did make a mention about what we have done in terms of internationalization and impress also, so we did think in terms of, and I did notice that there is hardly any contribution towards the policy making, so we came out with a new draft for the government, which was finally termed as Impactful Policy Research in Social Science. And it was circulated to different ministries. Professor Bhushan was also part of that. And we did receive the feedback from the different ministries and the department. And finally, this scheme went through, and now we saw last year, we had a historic response to the scheme. As many as 2,500 applications we received. And finally, we sat together. Sachin happens to be part of that. Finally, we awarded on policy issues 739 proposals, in fact. The idea is that over the next 2.5 years, we would have 1,500 policy researchers going on in the country. So already 50% of that is achieved against the very first call. And so far as our internationalization is concerned, in 2017 itself, at ICSSR, we have both the types of arrangement, both bilateral as well as multilateral. In 2007, we proposed that multilateral researches focusing India should be conducted, and we went for ECUP, that is Europe-India platform, wherein India-centric issues would be taken by the Indian scholars and in collaboration with the European scholars, and from Europe, there would not be less than 2 collaborating countries, in fact. So that's the idea, and it has already gone ahead. In 2018, we have already completed the award process, and this is how our experience with the word is definitely growing. And in the concept note itself, I think the kind of issues that have been flagged, they need the attention of all. I think during discussion, or maybe through your observation, many of those issues will be addressed, and you might speak from your experiences also about that. So at this itself, I would like to say thanks once again to the organizers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Malhotra. I think you have raised both the key points that were there for our discussion. One is how to enhance the impact of the research which is being done, and second, how to enhance the quality of policy inputs which are going in, and enhance the absorptive capacity of the government. So, as you recall, Vice Chairman Niti Aayog called both of us for this discussion, and since it's a closed-door meeting, I can share that with everyone, that there is growing willingness now that Prime Minister is very keen that the social science research structure should get streamlined in terms of how we are connected with the policy research, and how we are accountable, and how we create platforms. So what is happening is, and at the back of the mind is that we are not celebrating our research enough. We look forward for recognition on platforms which are outside in the country. So how we enhance quality in such a manner that we are able to celebrate our own research work that Professor Malhotra has very, I would say, discreetly indicated. So there are some discussions going on, and there is an effort to address both the issues. Now I would request Vice Chairman, University Grant Commission, Dr. Bhushan Patwardhan, for his remarks.
Yeah, thanks, Sachin, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I'm aware of RI's excellent contributions, and was very happy to hear the young Professor Mohan Kumar. Although he may be 60 years old bureaucrat, he is a young professor of 2 years. You know, so you just heard Professor V.K. Malhotra, and the scheme which he talked about, known as Impress, you know, has really impressed the Indian academia. I'm here to assure you that UGC is committed for think tank university linkages. You know, and we are willing to take necessary steps required to build and strengthen it. Why I say build? Because I think in our current university system, it is either very weak or practically non-existent, and we really need it, because young students, I don't know how many of them have get opportunity to actually participate in policy making process, and how much of policymakers actually are getting into the university system and connecting with the students in the teaching. Mohan Kumar may be one of the good exceptions, you know, who has been doing it. But by and large, I'm talking about base of the pyramid. And as UGC, we are more concerned about strengthening the base of the pyramid. And when I'm telling you base of the pyramid for our overseas friends, India has a unique structure. For example, UGC is the apex regulator, which is not only funding but also regulating quality of education, has to handle near 900 universities, about 40,000 plus colleges, which are affiliated colleges essentially, and about 10,000 standalone institutions. So it's a huge structure. But the base of the pyramid is, we look at the top where IITs and IIMs are there, which normally are well known. They're at the top of the pyramid, but the base are state-funded institutions, which are mostly state universities and state-affiliated colleges. And we would really like to strengthen them and link them in the whole process, because talent is equally distributed. It's about creating more opportunity for those who are in the system, those young bright minds. And we also would think UGC offers near 10,000 research fellowships. I think India must be one of probably the only country where government is giving PhD fellowships in such a huge number. Otherwise, there are PhD fellowships which are project-based, competitive-based. But these are actually examination-based qualifying PhD fellowships. In addition, we also have a large number of postdoctoral fellowships, and we are willing to really earmark some of the postdoctoral fellowships for strengthening this think tank university linkages. In addition, based on the deliberations which happen here, whatever are the takeaways and whatever is required from the UGC to be done, we'll be very happy to do that. As it is, we are well connected with RIS, not only because of Sachin, but because of many other initiatives. In fact, next week again I am coming to RIS for some different reason. And I'm happy that ICSSR is involved. Like in UGC now, at the government, you'll see Sachin talked about a lot of changes that are coming up, including the working hours and holidays. But one more thing which we have started doing is at the highest level, at least, we have started breaking barriers and breaking silos. So we consider ICSSR also as part of UGC, and same ICSSR considers UGC as part of ICSSR. Same thing happens when I go to AICTE, and these are emerging as uniform bodies, and therefore the schemes, we ensure that there are no duplications, but we complement each other, and from that perspective, we'll be very happy to contribute our bit in this process. And thanks for inviting me here, and we'll look forward to hear from you more. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Professor Patwardhan. Now, I think the mics are on your table. We can start with the group one, which is being chaired by the convener is Professor Chintamani Mahapatra, and we already have identified a convener for each cluster. The cluster is going to discuss some issues now. Those of you who are on some other tables may also join the table that you like, as you would hear the convener telling you about the theme that his group would be discussing. So if you want to jump across, please feel free. We have time from almost now, this is 5 o'clock to 5:45 to discuss, and then we come back. But opportunity would be not just for convener, but for everybody to speak. So first to Professor Chintamani Mahapatra. He is rector of one of the leading universities in IR, the Jawaharlal Nehru University.
Namaskar. Good afternoon to all of you. Distinguished colleagues, I'll just flag a few points for detailed discussion. Let me begin by thanking the Prime Minister for supporting an idea like this. I'm a student of political science and IR. I can't recall a country even today where the government would propose a particular policy and then ask the common people to give the feedback, and hundreds of thousands of feedback would come, and then the policy would be made. It is remarkable. Even in the United States, we don't have this kind of system. Last time we heard about a referendum in UK was on Brexit, right? So this is a remarkable thing. Now, about policy input, there is a complaint in the United States of America, the country that I study, that policymakers don't listen to professors. They don't listen to think tank specialists. This is the refrain in the United States. In India, we do the same. But if the government itself is trying to receive policy input from think tanks, it is really great. Having said that, let me make a few observations about the theme, Think Tank and University Connect. Initially, when I thought about the topic, I thought, is it the connect between India and the global south as far as think tank and universities are concerned? Or are we talking about think tank and university connect as a concept? Let me, as a concept, flag a few points that can be debated. Universities and think tanks, they are two separate entities. their goals are different, and their characters are different, the size and dimensions are different, the scope and scale are different. University believes in teaching as well as research. Think tanks only and only research and maybe seminar conferences. In the university system, we talk about basic knowledge and basic research, whereas in think tanks, we talk about policy perspective and policy research. Either we criticize the policies the government do, or we try to suggest alternative policy, or we can make research and give prescriptive recommendations to the government. Does it mean that we should not have any linkage? Of course, we should have linkages. Now, at the moment in the United States of America, for example, the reason I keep talking about the USA, because out of 6,600 think tanks in the world, the number one is the United States. And interestingly, number two is India. In the US, you have more than 1,700 think tanks. In India, 507. China comes third now. Now, in the US, there are universities where think tanks are located within the universities. Then there are think tanks which are located outside the university. There are think tanks which are known as universities without students. Brookings, for example, which is in India. So these kind of think tanks are there. At the moment, currently around the globe, think tanks are facing tremendous amount of stress for 2-3 reasons. Number one, the source of funding is drying up. Even the governments are not able to fund the think tanks adequately. Number two, questions are being raised. If the governments are going to fund it and then dictate what is to be done, what is not to be done, then the autonomy, the freedom to do research becomes limited. Number three, if the corporate sector gives the funding to the universities, then these think tanks become nothing but corporate lobby groups. Then there are advocacy groups. They promote think tanks and they try to advocate certain issues or the policies that would suit their purpose. So the time is to think what kind of think tank university linkage we really want. Number 3 point, the third point is, suppose we believe in linking the think tanks in India, 507 and more than 900 universities, how are we going to do it? Think tanks of different kinds do different kind of research. I have a few suggestions. Number one, universities can identify few think tanks and have some kind of MOU so that there could be collaborative research, joint workshop, seminar, conferences. And as part of that collaboration, it is also likely that somebody from the think tank can come and locate himself or herself in a university and teach the students. Because the focus of research is totally different, and the classroom teaching are different, and the students will benefit a great deal if somebody comes as a visiting scholar or visiting professor. Secondly, those who are teaching and doing research, they know very well that they have limited time to do research. Now, if for 6 months or 1 year, a professor is located in a particular think tank, suppose from JNU goes to ITSA, with clear-cut policy issue and does research for about 1 year and gives a policy input to the government, it will greatly benefit. Because in the university, they keep on doing research on issues which may not be relevant to the government at all. But the moment they are located in the think tanks, they will be instructed to do research only on certain policy-related issues, and it can be really very, very useful. Next point is revolving door. Somebody from think tank can come to university can go to think tank. We always say, oh, those think tankers, they have never experienced in guiding research. Shall we allow them to become co-guide? Let's think about it. And just 1 minute more, then I just conclude. Now, the UGC, not the UGC, MHRD has come up with a new education policy. In the new education policy, the number one highlight is the liberal arts, how to promote it. And this is another fantastic initiative by Government of India. As Mr. Patwardhan was saying, the government is giving so much of fellowships. In the United States, liberal arts are promoted basically by private colleges. If the government is going to promote liberal arts, that is where at one time I was discussing with Sachinji, how to make IR broad-based so that somebody who is studying environment or sociology can be part of IR, And so those who are teaching IR should also make the broad base, this going beyond it is interdisciplinarity or multidisciplinarity or transdisciplinarity. So these are the inputs I thought I would say.
Thank you. Thanks, Professor Mohapatra. My idea is that we would have the convener of each group speak for 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes, just to give us the broad sort of sweep as to they see, and then discuss it in the group, and then come back so that we can manage our time effectively. But thanks, Professor Mohapatra, for highlighting. Now I turn to Dr. Shriram Cholia, who is Dean and Professor of Jindal School of International Relations, and we see him in most of the print pages in India on IR. So, Shriram.
Thank you, Sachin. I'll just speak about the South-South angle of this theme, because Professor Mohapatra covered a lot of the domestic, our Indian context. I think one of the issues that we were mandated to discuss was about how much we can cooperate across nation states of the global south. As a university professor, I find that indeed there is still a significant West-centric orientation with regard to cooperation. So when we sign MOUs and activate them, there is a natural tendency for us to believe the core assumption is that richer countries have superior universities and have attained a certain level of intellectual and professional accomplishments. So we can learn more from them than with a Bangladesh university or a Costa Rican university or a Malawian university. So the core assumption is that by engaging with universities and think tanks also in the north, it will create more opportunities for our students, for our faculty to get grants, to apply for funding and all these things. What's the point of engaging with other developing countries where maybe we are actually, there is a presumption also that maybe India is anyway ahead of many of these LDCs and so on. So what is there to learn from them? So I think that's the fundamental challenge that is holding us back, and maybe we can discuss that. Yeah. The other point was about IR studies, which is also a mandate given to us, and whether we can connect it to other fields, as Professor Mohapatra was mentioning. Indeed, you see the South-South, the way it is framed is relations between countries and societies. So most of the discipline that is most relevant to this does seem to be international relations. But as we are finding, across the social science, even science diplomacy, RIS has been doing a lot of work on this. There are areas outside the social science and the humanities where I think we need to deepen this. And IR could be one of the pillars on which we can promote this multidisciplinarity South-South engagement.
Thank you, Shriram. I also have Jyoti Chandramani here. She is director of Symbiosis School of Economics, University of Symbiosis in Pune. So, Jyoti.
Thank you. I think I'm loud enough. All right. Thank you for this opportunity. And I really was connecting the dots since the last 2 days. And there are some anecdotal kind of evidences that I can see that when I was doing my PhD and my research at some point of time, and I looked for data or I looked for policy, I was driven to RIS or to other, think tanks that had already put up these kind of things. Now this was a kind of a surprise to me because you have these think tanks putting up research papers, but where is it coming from? The universities? And that's where my collaboration with RIS really began. Now looking at this, being in academics for the last more than 35 years, I have come up with what is a 5-point kind of a model, which I call as the RPI. So when you're looking at the think tank University Connect, it has to be based on these 5 principles. 5 principles which will embed South-South cooperation, which will embed development, and it will embed cooperation in terms of policy making, research, as well as capacity building. So here when I talk about the RPI model, I say the academics has to have it embedded in it, because we are doing the first step of what you call capacity building of students to be aware of it. Without awareness, how are you going to move ahead? So the pedagogy, the curriculum, the experiential kind of learning, etc., where having good associations with think tanks will enrich not only the think tank, but also the university and create a capacity for the future. So the 4 C's over here, or 5 C's that can come up, are collective, collaboration, capacity building, cooperation, and all kinds of connects that can come out of that. In R comes the research, and that research comes out with, you know, somebody from a think tank and some faculty from a university working together, you know. So that helps bringing in what is also away from the textbook and also to what is the real life. The P part of it is the placement of the students and the faculty into the policies, because South-South cooperation has great principles attached to it, and those values get embedded into the framework. And of course, I think students along with the think tank should have opportunities for internships and connects. So this leads to, you know, engagement, students, faculty both, and anyway when we come for such programs, it leads to enhanced engagement.
Thank you. Thanks, Jyoti. I go to next table where we have Dr. Arvind Kumar, Professor and Head, Department of Geopolitics and International Relations at Manipal Academy of Higher Education, Bangalore. So, Dr. Arvind Kumar.
Thank you very much. I think there is no denying the fact that there is a growing recognition that India needs a number of good specialists working on each and every part of geopolitical region. So in that context, obviously, the type of training which is being given at the master's level across the universities in India, obviously will be complemented by getting the training at the think tank. And as the previous speaker said, that internship can certainly be a very good idea. In a very modest manner, our department has started this process way back in 2010. What we do that we send our students to the various think tanks for doing their internship on a very specific research theme, and they get back with a publication. At the master's level, providing such training obviously has been very unique exercise. But obviously this type of connect, which the idea has come from RIS, obviously needs to be complemented. There is no denying the fact. Obviously how to do that, what type of things can happen, what can be the, in fact, module which can really govern this type of connections, that has to be discussed. And obviously we can come up with certain very concrete result. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Arvind Kumar. Now I turn to Professor Sudarshan Ramaswamy, Professor and Dean Jindal School of Government and Public Policy. So when we were doing this research, we were trying to identify IR schools in India, and then we found that public policy institutions also cover international relations. So we approached 50 institutions, 38 responded, and 29 are now here. So Professor Ramaswamy.
Thank you very much, Sachin. It's very, you know, I'm more ancient than Ambassador Mohan Kumar. And I recall that a distinguished professor of political science, Rajni Kothari, and before him, a distinguished professor of economics, Dr. Raj Krishna from Jaipur, both of them maintained that our government is knowledge proof, so there's no point in trying to do policy-oriented research. Now, I must say it's very refreshing that seems to have changed. And that's palpable, the change. That government thinks that it needs to reach out, and policy is complex and requires a lot of evidence and research. And therefore, there's that opening, which is very good for think tanks as well as universities. But what I'd like to underline is really the point about our students. Our students say, those studying economics the world over, are no longer interested in theoretical formulations and what they regard as academic textbook stuff. They want to know how their knowledge and learning connects to the real problems of the world. So if they see inequality, if they see gender discrimination, if they see unemployment, they want to know what is it that we are studying that will make a difference to these issues. So the interest of young people in actually in tackling real problems, and to say, will knowledge inform me to tackle these real problems, is important. And therefore, it is compelling then to have understanding and linkages with think tanks that are connected to policy. Because the university is directly not going to be asked by some government ministry to produce a background note. A think tank is very likely to. And I think we, also the other thing is that all the universities, we have so many universities in the country, but very few think tanks for them to connect to. They're all concentrated or mostly in Delhi or Kolkata or Mumbai, and other cities and towns don't have enough think tanks. So we have a big job to promote think tanks and to have meaningful memoranda of understanding with those think tanks so that our students and faculty can benefit.
Thank you. Thanks, Sudarshan. I go now to table number 6, where we have Professor Renu Modi. She teaches at University of Mumbai at the Center for African Studies. So, Renu.
Sachin, good evening, and delegates, good evening. So I'll just carry forward of what has not been said. I would like to discuss on my table the pedagogic landscape of this. And for example, curriculum design, bibliographic reading list, and a Southern database, which we have not had. And second, we have database on, I'm specifically talking of South-South cooperation studies. So we have discussions on OECD DAC, USAID, JICA, etc. But we do not talk about the work done by the Cuban people in Africa on medical help, PICA, Azerbaijan, Turkey, the Islamic Development Cooperation. So I would like to do all that. And also in the curriculum, I would like to be innovative and include things like solar energy, Ayush, traditional medicine, indigenous technologies, to include all these new things which we are not discussing, and financial inclusion, gender mainstreaming, skilling youth across the Southern countries.
Thank you. Thanks, Renu. I think before I just leave the tables to discuss their ideas, I'm very delighted and encouraged to see several of our international delegates in this room. Those who are part of the table, their names are of course listed so you know each other. But those of our friends who are from abroad, I would very much like to request them to introduce themselves and then choose a table. Those who have already chosen are most welcome to continue on those tables. But those who haven't, please join one table or the other. Then in the second round, I would also request some of the other participants from the conference who have joined here, and I would and from other think tanks and universities who were not listed here but have joined. Most welcome. I would first like to go across the foreign delegates. So I see Elizabeth right here. Why don't you introduce yourself? And I am not sure if you require a mic, but definitely it's just there. Yeah. No, it's right there.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Sideropoulos, and I'm from a think tank in Johannesburg, the South African Institute of International Affairs, which is based at Wits University, but not part of it. But we're actually currently in discussions to formalize the relationship much more than the informal collaboration we've had in the past. And I think just the remarks around the table over the last half an hour have been really extremely rich, and I commend you on this initiative.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You have Professor Pokhriyal right in front of you from Nepal.
Yeah, we have a long association with ISSR. I'm happy to tell you that we have been entered into the MOU. I am a founding chairman of one of the leading think tank in Nepal, Institute for Strategic and Socio-Economic Research. Until very recently, 2 weeks ago, I resigned from my ambassadorial responsibility. Because Tiruvallur University and academic, community dragged me back to Kathmandu. Because I spent my 39 years of good days back in teaching economics, and I headed the department for an awfully long time. So I'm back to my institute.
Yeah, thank you.
Glad to be here.
You sound very happy, actually.
Yeah.
When you say that.
Professor Thakur from Nepal. Yeah.
Thank you, Sachin.
Yeah, Professor Thakur. Yeah.
I am from the Tiruvallur University, Central Department of Management. And I would like to, may I provide some opinion? Or only introduction is?
Only introduction at this point, and we would go for opinions later.
This is my introduction, and I am the Executive Director of the SEDA, that is Center for Economic Development and Administration, Tiruvallur University.
Thank you. You also have Commodore Vasan here, who represents a think tank. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a few points because...
points we would take later. Just introduce yourself. And
then, Vasan, I look after the Chennai Center for China Studies, and also look after the National Maritime Foundation Tamil Nadu chapter. The Chennai Center for China Studies incidentally is ranked 30th best think tank amongst 19 India, South Korea, Japan and China. It's also been ranked the 48th best independent think tank out of 145 think tanks globally.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we have the New York University here.
Thank you, Sachin. W.P.S. Sidhu from New York University. And
NYU,
I've spent most of my life in the think tank world, including at Brookings, India, but also within think tank in New York University, and now in a teaching center Center for Global Affairs in New York University. So it's interesting to see this even where universities have think tanks and teaching co-located. Very often they don't necessarily talk to each other. So there's potential there. And I mean, lots of other things to add on to. Just one thing very briefly, I'll say, picking up from Professor Mahapatra's idea of the revolving door. I think it's not enough just to have a revolving door between the think tanks and the universities. I think it also has to extend to government. And this is something that we increasingly have sort of seen in different ways. It doesn't have to be long-term, not at all. But, you know, certainly there should be that aspect of it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sidhu. Can we take the mic back there? And I would request all our foreign delegates. So, Professor Kleitis, I can see right from here. So, Jorge, yeah. So, yeah. No, Gladys, you first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Gladys Lecchini from National University of Rosario in Argentina. It's far from here. I teach IR and I'm the PhD director of the courses of the IR in Rosario. And I'm very proud to say that our faculty is the first faculty in Latin America doing studies on IR since 1922.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we take to Jorge and then Professor Datta?
Thank you, Sachin. Good afternoon. Jorge Perez from Anáhuac University in Mexico, far from here as well. And I'm attached to the Faculty of Economics, but teaching development studies and these issues, and formerly in another Mexican think tank called Mora Institute. And thank you for being here and listening, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Datta.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Madhurya Kumar Datta. I'm working for the Mekong Institute for promoting sub-regional cooperation in the Greater Mekong sub-region. We are not a part of the university, but an intergovernmental organization based in Thailand. Thank you.
In Thailand. Thailand, yes. And I see Ambassador Sharing there from Bhutan.
Thank you. My name is Dagwo Sharing. I belong to the Royal Society of Senior Citizens. And I try to look after the senior citizens' welfare.
Thank you. Professor Stephen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, good evening. My name is Stephen Marks. I am not from the Global South, but always identified with the Global South throughout my entire career. 12 years in the United Nations, and I direct a program called Human Rights in Development at my university, which is announced earlier as Harvard University. But I'm also affiliated with and a member of the governing body of O.P. Jindal Global University. And I, of course, attach enormous importance to Think Tank University Connect.
Thank you. Thanks, Stephen. Have I missed anyone? I was seeing Ambassador Sinha there, but I think he's stepped out now. Anybody else? If not, then kindly start deliberations on the tables, and after some time we would hear the deliberations. And those of you who haven't joined the tables, please join some of the tables. So around 15 minutes, and we would be keenly looking forward for. I also would. Alice, you did not introduce yourself. Why don't you do that? Yeah, IPSA, from Brazil. Ladies and gentlemen, only one person left. Shiram, only one person left is.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm Alice. I'm from Brazil. I'm just attached to RIS right now. I'm an IPSA fellow. So, yeah, I just wanted to...
Thank you and welcome. You can join any of the tables. Thank you. Yeah, David.
Thank you.